I've watched probably 100 new movies this year, and now that we're just a couple sleeps away from 2024, it's time for me to share my 10 favorite movies of 2023. What's up, my dude? Your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and if you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies that are coming out in theaters and on streaming, make sure you subscribe. All right, before we get started with today's video, disclaimer, these are not what I think are the best movies of 2023 or the most popular or the ones that I think are cinematic masterpieces. These are my personal favorites, the movies I enjoyed watching the most. So understand that this is super biased, probably as biased as you can possibly get. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with my number 10. My 10th favorite movie of 2023 is the fourth movie in its franchise, and that is John Wick Chapter 4. Now, if you're not familiar with the John Wick franchise, it follows Keanu Reeves' character, John Wick, who is basically a retired hitman. And in the very first movie, certain things happen to him that kind of get him back into the game, and we follow his journey through these 4 movies. And with this particular movie, John Wick Chapter 4, it is by far the most action-packed in the entire franchise. There are some insane fight scenes and some stunning locations. Just a few scenes that really stand out to me. One is a whole fight scene in this kind of mansion, and they do something really cool where they give you this top-down shot. So you see John Wick and some of his enemies kind of moving through the mansion from almost this video game perspective. It really reminded me of Hotline Miami, which is a great game. It's a fun little shooter from a top-down perspective. So they definitely have some really clever cinematography choices in the movie. And again, just some great fight scenes. There's a fight scene that takes place on stairs with John Wick trying to move up the stairs and getting pushed back by different enemies. Really, I can't over-express how incredible some of these fight scenes are in the movie. The director is Chad Stahelski, and he was a fight coordinator and, in fact, the stunt double for Keanu Reeves in a bunch of movies, including The Matrix. And this guy absolutely knows how to shoot action. The movie also has an insane cast with, of course, Keanu Reeves, as well as Donnie Yen, who plays this blind kind of swordsman, Hiroyuki Sanada, who's a Japanese actor that you've definitely seen in a ton of movies, Scott Adkins, who's another great action star, playing a character that he is almost entirely unrecognizable as. But all in all, yes, John Wick, a great time at the theaters, tons of wild, over-the-top, very well choreographed and shot action sequences, and easily one of my favorite movies of the year. Coming in at number 9, we're gonna take a sharp left turn into a completely different genre of movies, and that is with a movie called Past Lives. Now, Past Lives is the directorial debut of Celine Song, and it's a romantic drama type of movie, and I think it's supposed to be a bit autobiographical. It follows the main character, who is a Korean woman, and starts with her, I think, around 12 years old in South Korea, where she is very close with a young man. You know, it's one of those situations where a boy and a girl kind of grow up together and their families always assume that they're just going to end up together at some point. Well, they have this really sweet relationship, and unfortunately, her and her family end up moving away to Canada. So their kind of budding relationship comes to an end. Then, 12 years later, when they're both in their early to mid 20s, they reconnect through social media. But that ultimately doesn't work out because they're still on opposite sides of the planet. Then we reconnect with them another 12 years down the road when they're in probably their mid 30s. She's living in New York and he is still living in Korea, but decides to come to New York to visit her. Now, of course, at this point in her life, she's completely moved on. She's married. And so a big part of the movie is dealing with this kind of pain and discomfort of reconnecting with someone that you were once so incredibly close with. And then, of course, all of the questions of what if, you know, what would have happened if she stayed in Korea? What would have happened if they really reconnected 12 years prior? And are they still those 12-year-old kids that they once were, or are they now completely different people? It's a lot of emotion for sure, and a very simple movie in concept and in execution, but ultimately something that had a really big impact on me, especially when you consider that it was her directorial debut. So I'm really excited to see what Celine Song has next. I think there's a real chance you're going to be hearing her name in the future. Okay, coming in at number 8 is another movie by a couple of first-time filmmakers. This movie is directed by Danny and Michael Philippou, who are a couple of Australian YouTubers, and it's a horror movie called Talk to Me. It really blows my mind how good this movie is when you consider, 1, that it was done by a couple of people who had never directed a movie before, and 2, it was done for a very small budget, and 3, the lead actor in the movie hasn't really done much of anything else prior to this. And yet, despite all that, despite all of the inexperience and the lack of funds, this movie is insanely good. Okay, so what's it about? All right, well, Talk to Me, you've probably seen the commercials or trailers for it, but there's a group of teenagers in Australia that find this hand, and it's not a real hand, but it's kind of a ceramic or stone hand. And when they grab the hand, kind of like in a handshake fashion, and say the words, "talk to me," they're presented with some kind of spirit. A deceased person appears before them. Then they say something to the effect of, "I let you in." And that spirit possesses their body. And it ends up becoming kind of like an allegory for drug addiction, I think, because when they're possessed by that spirit, they experience this kind of euphoria that reminds me of somebody who's probably on drugs. And so the whole process becomes really addicting. However, if you hold on to the hand for too long, you can end up becoming permanently possessed by these demons or spirits. And as you can imagine, somebody holds on to it for too long. So it is a very interesting and unique type of horror movie that I haven't really seen before. It's expertly shot, despite the fact that these guys are brand new. The acting is incredible, especially from the main character in the movie. And yeah, it is easily, I think, my favorite horror movie from 2023. So I had to put it on the list. Coming in at number 7 is another movie with a surprisingly low budget. And that's a movie straight out of Japan called Godzilla Minus One. Now, Godzilla Minus One had a $15 million budget, which I know sounds like a lot of money, but in the world of a Godzilla movie, it's really not. And despite that budget, this movie looked absolutely incredible. It looked like something with a budget of well over $100 million, to be honest. And now, if you're like me and you'd only really seen the American Godzilla movies, this is nothing like any of those. And really, it is so much better than any of the American Godzilla movies I've ever seen. And despite the fact that there are over 30, I think, Japanese Godzilla movies that have come out up to this point, Godzilla Minus One is a fresh jumping off point for anyone. It kind of reboots the entire franchise. So if you're not super familiar with the Godzilla movies or haven't really seen any of the Japanese ones, you can totally start fresh with Godzilla Minus One, and I don't think you'll regret it. The plot of this particular installment too is so incredible. It follows a Japanese man right after the end of World War II, and he was a suicide bomber, or a kamikaze pilot, as they were known in Japan. And the movie kind of begins with him abandoning his duty. He's supposed to take off and go fly and, complete the mission. And he pretends that his plane is having a malfunction, and he ends up landing on a strip on this island. And that is where the first appearance of Godzilla takes place. So the movie is about this man dealing with this kind of shame that he has, with him feeling that he shouldn't be alive, and him kind of coming to terms with that and learning to appreciate the fact that he is alive. And all the while, you have Godzilla kind of running rampant through cities and destroying the kind of remains of what's left over in Japan after World War II and after the place had already seen so much destruction. It is such an interesting concept and really such a powerful movie, in addition to being a movie about a giant monster. So it's got a lot going for it, and I really had a great time watching it. So I highly recommend Godzilla Minus One. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to my 6th favorite movie of 2023, and that is another sequel in Creed 3. I feel like this movie's kind of flown under the radar a little bit, especially for a movie in the Rocky/Creed franchise. But Creed 3 marked the directorial debut of Michael B. Jordan, and I think he absolutely crushed it in his first time around. I'm noticing there's a lot of first-time directors on my list. But in Creed 3, we see Adonis Creed, who is also played by Michael B. Jordan, as he's kind of getting towards the end of his career, when suddenly a ghost from the past reappears. There, he has to come face to face with some troubling aspects of his past and learn how to let go of what was. One of my favorite things about this movie, in addition to the story and the characters, which I think are fantastic, is the way that they shot some of the fight scenes. Michael B. Jordan is a big anime fan himself, and you can really tell that he took a lot of inspiration from shows like Dragon Ball Z or Naruto, or really any other kind of action-packed shonen show. And some of the fight scenes, especially the final fight of the movie, have some pretty significant nods to some of these anime that I know I grew up watching. So yeah, for me, I think this is my favorite of the Creed trilogy, and it has so much of what I love in these movies. All right, before we get into my top 5 favorite movies of 2023, I want to let you know that this video is sponsored by you. That's right, I'm just a tiny little channel here without any big corporate sponsors or anything like that, so just by watching the videos, you're really helping me out. If you want to be super dope though and show your support in the easiest possible way, do me a favor and like this video, and maybe comment down below. Let me know your favorite movies from 2023. And don't worry, this is a judgment-free zone. You can also now join as a channel member if you want to help support me financially. I'll actually be posting a separate video with my number 11 to number 20 favorite movies of 2023. That'll be for channel members only. But if you don't want to do that, you can also just subscribe for free to keep up on all the new movies coming out. Either way, whatever you do, I appreciate it. All right, back to the list. Coming in at number 5 is a satirical comedy drama starring Jeffrey Wright, who I feel like is an underrated actor that I really love seeing. The movie is called American Fiction, and it's about Jeffrey Wright's character, who is an author, trying to sell his novels to different publishers. And all the while, he's seeing that some of the more successful authors, specifically his fellow African-American authors, are getting great success by writing these stories that are in a lot of ways stereotypical. And so he in the movie ends up writing what is basically a drunken joke, a story that fits into all of those stereotypes, but it ends up completely taking off. And so he has to kind of live this lie, pretending that he's a different author than he actually is. And really the whole movie is this satire on race and race relations in America and what can happen when you go a little too woke. It's honestly hilarious and such a brilliant insight into what happens when you go a little too far in one direction. The movie also has Sterling K. Brown in it, who plays Jeffrey Wright's brother in a phenomenal performance. He's actually been getting a lot of Oscar buzz, and deservingly so in my opinion. But yeah, American Fiction is really smart and really funny and really has a lot of heart. So it's another movie I highly recommend and another one of my favorite movies of the year. Okay, we're getting there. Coming in at number 4 is a movie that I was very much looking forward to at the beginning of the year, and it lived up to my expectations and then some. And that is the most recent animated Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. When I first saw Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is the prequel to this one, it totally blew me away. The visuals were insane in that movie, and I felt like it really took the medium of animation to another level. So when we knew that they were making the sequel that came out this year, honestly, I thought that it probably wouldn't live up to the original, but if it could come close, then that would be enough. And I was right. It didn't live up to the original. It surpassed the original in just about every way. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse has an amazing story that is so heartfelt and compelling. You feel so much for the main character and even some of the side characters, and the animation is second to none. I have not seen a movie with better animation than this one, and that's no joke. I mean that. Now, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse wasn't a perfect movie, at least not in my opinion. It did have an issue with the ending, where we all know that there's one more movie coming, at least one more in this franchise and in this storyline. And so the way that this movie ends is on a cliffhanger. And in my personal opinion, it's not a good cliffhanger. It's one of those cliffhangers that the movie just kind of ends in the middle of a major plot development and then just hits you with a to be continued. And so despite that, despite the fact that I did not like the way this movie ended, the rest of it was so incredible that I had to put it high up on my list. I cannot wait to see what they do next with this animated universe, and my fingers are crossed that we find a way to tie this into live action. I cannot wait, and I hope we get to see a live action Miles Morales, hopefully sooner than later. Okay, now we're in our top 3, and this number 3 pick, I think, is definitely going to surprise a lot of people. But here's the thing. I'm a simple man. One of my favorite genres by far is comedy. And when I watch a comedic movie that has me busting out laughing and just dying from some of the jokes in it, it's going to make it pretty high on my list. And probably the funniest movie I saw in 2023. In fact, no, definitely the funniest movie I saw in 2023 is a little movie called Bottoms. And I say little movie because this movie had a pretty small budget and it didn't make a lot of money in theaters, which is really unfortunate because it is so hilarious. Okay, let me tell you what this movie's about, and I'll try to keep it pretty simple. So this is a rated R comedy. Definitely rated R. And it is about a couple of high school lesbian girls who end up forming a fight club in their high school, all as a ploy to get laid. That's it. That is the plot of the movie. It is completely ridiculous in so many ways. The writing, the dialogue is so sharp. The characters are out of their minds insane. And there's also a smaller role played by Marshawn Lynch, the football player, who I had no idea was as funny as he is. He totally steals so many of the scenes that he's in. This movie is completely irreverent. It takes so many tropes and flips them on their head. And if you like those kind of early 2000s raunchy teen comedies like Superbad or American Pie, but you thought that we'd never get movies like that again, absolutely check out Bottoms. It really feels like Superbad walked so Bottoms can run. And if you're into that kind of comedy, I cannot recommend it more. All right, and then there were two. Coming in at number 2, my second favorite movie of 2023 is probably a movie that is on a lot of people's lists. And that is a small movie, a very low budget, didn't make a lot of money. Not a lot of people saw this in theaters, I think. Let me know if you've heard about it though. It's something called Barbie, I believe. Yeah, that's right. Of course. Barbie is one of my favorite movies of 2023. When I heard they were making a Barbie movie, I didn't really know what to expect. I knew Greta Gerwig, the writer and director of the movie, was really good at what she does, but I hadn't really seen her do a real straight comedy. You know, I had seen Little Women and Lady Bird, and I knew that she wrote very well and that she was a legit up-and-coming director, but I just couldn't figure out what was she gonna do with a property like Barbie. And wow, she totally blew me away here. The movie is so funny. Margot Robbie is fantastic as Barbie. Ryan Gosling as Ken totally steals the show. The world that they build, the Barbie dream world, is insane and so well put together. And it's one of those movies that is fun and funny and colorful and bright and kind of like a popcorn flick, but it also has a deeper message to it, which is something that is so hard to do. And yet it does it really, really well. I mean, I don't think I need to tell you how good Barbie is. I think we all know at this point. The movie's made over $1 billion, and it's taken Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig and even Ryan Gosling to even a whole new level of popularity and success. Also, shout out to Mattel for being willing to kind of put themselves out there like they did in this movie. They play kind of the villain, and for a company to be willing to paint themselves as the villain in the movie about their own product, that takes a lot of guts. So kudos to them. Okay, before I give you my number 1 pick, my favorite movie of 2023, if you're a fan of physical media like I am, I'm going to go ahead and link to all of these movies in the description box below. So jump down there if you want to pick up any of these movies on Blu-ray or on 4K. I'm going to go ahead and find the best prices for you and link them down there. Of course, those are also affiliate links, so if you use them, it helps out the channel and doesn't cost you anything extra at all. Okay, here we go. Coming in at number 1, my personal favorite movie of 2023 was Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Yeah, that's right. Look, as I said before, I don't think this is, a cinematic masterpiece. It's not anything that's going to win any major awards. But when I got out of the theater watching this movie, I was absolutely buzzing. And since then, I've watched this movie a dozen times. I bought it on Blu-ray. I've streamed it. I think it's streaming on Amazon Prime, so you can watch it there if you want to. For me, I'm a big fan of D&D in general. I've played it a ton. I've DM'd games. I've watched different D&D shows, including Critical Role, which is probably one of the big things that got me into D&D, or at least that pushed my love of it to another level. And this movie was an absolute treat. If you're a D&D fan, or if you've played D&D at all in your life, there's so much in this movie that feels like just a group of idiots sitting around a table playing the game. So much of what the characters do and the different things that happen to them feels like it's ripped right out of a D&D game. The world is also really interesting. The characters are kind of tropes, but they have their own depth to them as well. The acting is top notch. Chris Pine plays a bard, and he has so many hilarious scenes with his character. Another big standout was, I always pronounce this guy's name wrong, but Regé-Jean Page. His character is brilliant and has some of the moments in the movie that made me bust out laughing the most. It's just a really fun time. And it's one of those movies that I can just put on and rewatch over and over again and just not get tired of. Unfortunately, the movie didn't make much money at the box office, so I don't know if we're gonna get a sequel or anything like that. I did hear that the studio said something to the effect of they would greenlight a sequel if they were able to make the movie for less money, which is generally not a good sign. But hopefully the movie makes its money back in Blu-ray sales or becomes popular enough on streaming that they become willing to make another one. Because I think it's fantastic, and I think there's so much more that they can do with this universe and with these characters. So if you haven't seen Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, absolutely check it out. Like I said, I think it's streaming on Amazon Prime Video right now, so you can watch it for free if you're a Prime member. Also, back at the beginning of 2023, I posted a video about my 10 most anticipated movies of the year, and this was definitely on that. I also recently posted a video going over my 10 most anticipated movies of the year and breaking down whether or not I picked well. So if you want to see how horrible my picker might be and see if 2023 lived up to my expectations, I'll link that video for you right over here so you can jump into that next. And of course, if you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies that are coming out in theaters and on streaming, make sure you subscribe. All right, my dude, I'll catch you in the next one. Be good.